Today we've got a number of new people, but I want to just take just a bit of time here together before we actually come to the dedication part to make sure we understand what this is all about. I am a big fan of understanding. I'm not a big fan of religious activity. Okay? There's a lot of misunderstanding out in the world, out into where we live. As a matter of fact, I'll never forget, when we first moved in. We've been here for 20 years, actually. Still got the accent, will probably still remain forever. But moved, and then someone that I was speaking to, oddly enough, the names were Simpson, as my name is. And we were talking about things, and there was what became clear is that there is an understanding that if a baby is christened, baptized, that whatever label you want to put onto it, that baby then is guaranteed going to heaven. And that's what it's all about, okay? So I want to try and dispel that right now as clearly as I can, and hopefully we'll make that more understandable as we kind of go through this. So we do want to understand what this is and what this isn't. But first of all, I want to read just a little bit from that account in the Bible. It's from the first book of Samuel in the Old Testament, chapter 1, if anyone's following along with me. 1 Samuel chapter 1 chapter 1, verse 26, 27, and 28. We're just going to read right now verse 26 and 27, just the two verses. Let me read that, and we'll make a few comments and try and challenge each other, particularly Adam and Jesse and others who are connected to this here this morning. The Bible says, and she said, as Hannah came back after everything had happened, she says, "Oh my Lord, as your soul lives, I am the woman who stood by you here praying to the Lord." If you remember, she was praying. Eli, the priest, thought she had a few too many, and she was there drunk. And she said, "No, my heart is broken. My heart is distraught." She said, I'm praying in sincerity and honesty to God. And she said in verse 27, she said, "For this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me my petition, which I asked of him." The first thing we need to really understand, really get hold of, is that children are from God. Children are from God. Okay, I've been doing this long enough to realize that in a crowd this size, there are probably people who are thinking, "Eric, you're stupid, daft. What are you on about?" Okay? So, your view on this is vital to everything that we're doing today. From Psalm 127, which we read just in the beginning, it was plain to see that the Bible says that children are a gift or a heritage from the Lord. Children are a heritage from God. You may say, "Eric, well, you don't know biology very well then. I thought it took a bloke and a lass, and that's how a child is." Yes, that is the physicalness of it for sure. However, at the end of the day, a child, I'm going to say it very clearly now, a child is a special creation from God. As a matter of fact, the number of doctors that I come across, and they say, what a miracle a baby is. And I saw all three of ours born, and it's an incredible thing. What an amazing thing. And so we're going to be as strong as saying that children are from God. And your view on this is incredibly important as we continue on. We need to believe that children are a special creation from God and not just the results of some biological machine. Otherwise, everything we're doing this morning means absolutely nothing. We just should stop and go eat. Okay? The reality of the situation. Okay? So your view on this, your view on where children come from is incredibly important. That ultimately children are from God. Now here's the thing, it's easy to say that. Hard to put into practice. But if we believe it, if we believe that children are truly from God, then it's going to affect everything. Everything. It's going to affect how we deal with them, how we see them, boundaries that we set or don't set, what we teach, what we don't teach, what examples we are or examples that we aren't as we continue on, and we'll explain a few of those things. So as we understand and see that children are from God, that children are a gift from God, we need to even take it a bit further. Okay? Take it a bit further. If they are a gift from God, I want to ask you this now, and I'll ask you to put your thinking hats on really quickly. If they are a gift from God, who do they ultimately belong to? If they are a gift from God, they ultimately belong to God. Okay? I go to Asda. I buy some flowers for Lisa. Put out my well-worn Halifax debit card. Swipe it across there. I pay my £2.99. Aren't I great? Yeah. Pay my £2.99 for this little bunch of flowers. And who do they belong to? They belong to me. I give them to Lisa as a gift, yes, but ultimately I bought them. Right? My hard-earned dosh. I bought them, so they're mine, but I give them to Lisa. But ultimately they're mine. Right? In the same way that children ultimately really are God's. And as such, now you may not agree with me, and that's okay, but ultimately as such, if we see that children are from God, ultimately as such, we are really stewards or caretakers of God's property. Okay? That's a hard one to swallow, I get it. But ultimately we are stewards or caretakers of God's gift. So if we're going to be a steward or a caretaker of God's gift, there's two words that come up straight away in my mind. The first word is responsibility. Responsibility. I don't know of any other responsibility that's greater than having a child. Okay? There was a great theologian one time, Spider-Man, said that with great privilege comes great what? You know, Spider-Man people? Spider-Man? Thank you. Great privilege in having a child is a great privilege. Comes great responsibility. And within that recipe of responsibility comes respect for this little human being. And to be able to watch, when's Rory's birthday? We are knocking on a year, right?
Yeah,
4th of August. Okay, she's near the year. To watch her from the time of being an absolute teeny tiny little infant that needs absolute everything. Now, almost not even quite a year on, she is motoring along, isn't she?
Yeah.
Crawling everywhere. Even she took a few steps. That was really cool. And she'll recognize you now, and she'll do her little thing like that. Okay, right? She'll do a little thing like that, and she'll come doing her little commando crawl or whatever, and she'll grab your. For me, my child was like, one of those sorts of things. What an amazing thing that is. And to think that Adam and Jesse, you have responsibility for this gift from God. We need to respect that. But not only that, we need to see it as an obligation. Obligation. Eric, I thought obligation was kind of a negative word. No, it doesn't have to be. But it's sort of responsibility sort of taken up a notch. An obligation that this gift from God, God gives me this responsibility, this important, incredible creation that I need to love, I need to care for, I need to teach, I need to be an example. So there's this element of responsibility. As Hannah prayed, God gave her this baby, God gave her this child. She had to understand the responsibility, but also word of accountability. Now, this is near enough a 4-letter word today. Okay? People don't like to hear the word accountable, right? And accountability. So what is accountability in this context, in this idea? If I'm accountable for something, right? You're working a job, and you've got a gaffer. You are accountable for that gaffer for what? How you do your job. If you don't do your job well, what happens? You get the boot. You get the boot. And so I'm not saying God's going to give us the boot, but we are, as parents, Adam, Jesse, you are accountable to God on how well you take your responsibility. That's a pretty heavy thing. It's a cool thing because it helps keep me on track. And I will tell you, Jesse and Adam, just from my own experience, there's been more than one time that I've almost felt like throwing my hands up, saying, "Oh, what a pain in the neck this is." And Doreen makes me laugh every time she tells me her story about one of her kids packed a rucksack or something, a little bag or something like that with some dinner in it. And she says, she's 3 years old or however old she was, and she said, "I'm leaving." And she does a little walk. Obviously, Doreen was watching her and she walked out. And I think she said she turned around or whatever and decided to come back home. Sometimes as a parent, you can feel like that, right? Parents, right? You feel like that sometimes. But it's because you want to take your responsibility seriously and you understand your obligation and your love for that child. And I'm hoping that our accountability to God plays into that as well. And because of that, Adam and Jesse, you're going to be good caretakers or stewards of this gift that God has given. Now, I do have to put this in here, and this will be very unpopular, and almost sad, actually. But it's a reality that happens at times. As caretakers, we need to understand and accept that as our children rightfully belong to God, God sometimes reclaims his property. Okay, Eric, what do you mean by that? Well, we have a couple different angles on that. Number one, as a Christian, as a believer, I would say that if God, for our three children, Lisa and I, for our three children, if God chooses to and wants to be able to use our children in some way, for example, I'm living in England. Believe it or not, I am not from Rosington. Most people, when I say that, they say, "No." I said, "Yeah, I'm not from Rosington." They say, "Well, you blend right in. You sound just like Rosington folk." I said, "Well, thank you very much. I worked very hard at it." No, that's a lie, by the way. And so when we came to England, now my mother, long story. My mother, right at the end of her life, she helped share with me her story about her coming to faith herself, and it was a very simple kind of faith. But she really struggled with Lisa and I coming to England. Imagine why. Why would Mom struggle with me coming here? Why? Can you help me with this? Why do you think? Yeah, go on.
It's a child. No matter how old you are, a child is part of your family.
Of course. I'm her child. Yeah.
Still.
Yeah, exactly. And so now this was before the days of FaceTime and Snapchat. And Mom did, I think she had a mobile phone. And my brother got her a computer and tried to teach her, but it never worked. It never worked. And so you had to pick up the phone, you do that sort of thing. And it was okay, but the reality was we were 5,000 miles apart. And when Mom got cancer, it was very tough. It was very tough for me. And because she had her 2 grandchildren over here in the beginning, and then a 3rd over here, that was another level of struggle for her. And so for myself, I need to understand that if God chooses to take Chad or Courtney or Chase and do something and go to some far-flung region of the world, that God has a right to do that. But also, the reality is, moms and dads, and we have new people here, and I don't know your stories. I don't know your stories. But sometimes it is a reality that sometimes illness or even death could come into a family. And so, and often what happens is that there's so much pain there and so much struggle that we say, God can't be real, otherwise this wouldn't happen. And that's a whole other story. We don't have time to get into that. But if I can just offer just a bit of comfort, a bit of encouragement, that even though tragedy could come into a family like that, it doesn't mean that God doesn't love you. It doesn't mean that God is not real. But sometimes that this is just the way of the world. So children are from God. Children are from God. Incredibly important point to get into our mind. Number two. Coming into verse 28 there. Let me read this, and we're going to try and make this sort of the big important thing that we want to think about today. Verse 28 says this, therefore, in our Bible, now it's a weird word, let me just read it. It says, therefore, I have lent him to the Lord. So I've lent him to the Lord. That's kind of weird. The idea is that she gave him over to the Lord. Therefore, I have lent him, given him over to the Lord. As long as he lives, he shall be lent or given to the Lord. So they worship the Lord there. Hannah dedicated, and that's the word that is actually underneath that meaning of lent or give over. Hannah dedicated Samuel, her child, over to the Lord. And for Jesse and Adam, and for the family, and even the church family, that's what we're doing today. Number one, we need to realize there's a conscious decision. Conscious decision. Hannah just didn't have the idea pop up in her mind one morning and said, oh, I'm a bit bored today. Oh, I think I'll give Samuel over to God. Didn't work like that. Hannah didn't do it because everyone else was doing it. Certainly that was not the case. Hannah did it as a conscious decision. As a matter of fact, I would imagine because the idea was that Hannah had promised that if God would give her this child, that she would dedicate this child to God in such a way that Samuel would actually live in the temple and serve God there in the temple. Isn't that weird? I can't imagine that. But that was a special case that Hannah decided to do that. And quite probably there's family members that would have said, I may not have said that. What in the world what are you doing? Why, finally after all this time, you've got a child, you've got a baby, and now you're giving him over. Are you crazy or what? So Hannah, out of her desire to keep her promise to God, as God had given her this child, she understood that this child was from God. God had claims over this child. And do you think Hannah loved that baby any less when she gave him over to the Lord to dedicate this child in this way? You think, no, of course not. Of course not. The cool thing is, Hannah couldn't have children up until that time. And after that, I think she had another 4. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. And Samuel did not lose anything because she could go visit him and all these sorts of things. But in that special circumstance, in that special time, Hannah said, I'm going to give this child, dedicate this child over to God. Number 2, it was not just a conscious decision, it was a deliberate act. A deliberate act. It's easy to pray a prayer. We're going to pray a prayer here this morning of dedication over to the Lord for Aurora. It's easy to pray a prayer. It's easy to make a vow. It's easy to say, I promise this, I promise that. However, the proof is in the actions. What matters is what she did far more than what she said. Okay? And for all the parents that are here, I'm sure you would agree with me that actions are louder than words. Okay? Right? Reality is truth. I can tell my 3 kids, do this, do that, do the other, but if me and my actions and what I do is opposite of what I tell them, what do you think they're going to do? Are they going to listen to my words? Ain't no way. I apologize for saying ain't. We're in church. But ain't no way. They're going to do what I do, right? And then they'll call me a hypocrite. Call me a hypocrite. Dad, why do you say this, but then you do the other? Dad, why do you say that I have to be careful about what I look at on the internet? I have to be careful about the things that I see or the things that I listen to. But you're looking at this. You're listening to this. You're blah 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 blah. Fill in the blanks. I have mentioned before that I love some Britishisms that I've picked up over the years. I love the one that says the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. Love it. We don't have that in America. I need to pinch some of these and take them over and sell them or something. I don't know. Love it. I love it. Apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. And these things of what we do in our actions are all these apples that are coming down from the tree. And Aurora is going to see all these things. And she's going to follow the examples. Hannah did not make any empty promises. But what she said was what she did. There's a song, I'm wondering, I don't know if it made it across the water. Have you ever heard a song called Paper Roses? Yeah. Oh, really? Huh. Paper roses. Paper roses. Oh, how real those roses seem to me. You know what the next bit is? But they're only, what's the next word, you know? Imitation. Like your imitation love for me. So the songwriter had the same idea. He said, I don't care if you tell me that you love me. Words are easy. Show me in your actions. And that's what Hannah did. Hannah could have said, oh, I vow this, I promise this, I dedicate it, da 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 da. And then she forgot it the next day. But she followed through in what she had promised. She was, and we're going to say, she was faithful in her follow-through. Faithful in her follow-through. We have our Ukrainian guest with us today again. It's been lovely having Liana. And we talk about all kinds of weird Englishisms. You know that English is a weird language? It's weird. Where did we come up with these strange sayings? And how about the thing is, where the rubber meets the road? Do we say that? No? Oh, that must be Americanism. Okay. Well, that's where the rubber meets the road. Well, that means that where it really counts, what's really important, that's where it is. It's the idea of you can have this car put on jack stands. You could be revving that baby up, and the wheels go. You're not going anywhere. It's not till you let that car down on the floor. Then you give it the pedal, and then you go. So the idea is that Hannah was faithful in her follow-through. She was faithful. She had her deliberate actions of what she did. So for Adam and Jesse, and for all the godfather, the godmother, and even our church family, which is we're going to touch on here in just a few minutes as we come to our dedication, our words and our actions are going to build a foundation in Aurora's life. That's for sure. The question is, the real question is, what kind of foundation are you going to build? Every child, and each one of us, as we were growing up, we had a foundation of some sort. It could have been a strong foundation or a weak foundation. So the challenge is, as Aurora is now knocking on 1 year old, and the reality is, it's been shown that by the time a child reaches 5, 6, 7 years old, much has been set in her mind and in our hearts. So these next few years are absolutely vital. And I'm not trying to make a big deal out of something that's not a big deal, but this is a big deal. This is a big deal. Tremendous responsibility, tremendous accountability for these next few years that are coming up. So the question is, what kind of foundation are we going to build? And in verse 28, notice what I want you to notice what it says here. So they worshipped the Lord there. They worshipped the Lord there. As Hannah lent, as Hannah dedicated, as Hannah gave over this child Samuel to the Lord, Samuel was then in a God-filled environment. A God-filled environment. Does that mean that Samuel was praying 24/7? No. Does that mean that Samuel was reading the Bible 24/7? No. But it does mean that the things that Samuel was exposed to was sort of filtered with God's stuff. That God was important. That God was talked about. That serving God was there. And because of that, Samuel grew up to be the person that he was. Sadly, Samuel's kids didn't turn out so great. So there ain't no sort of, how can I say, guarantee for the... Each generation had its own responsibilities and obligations, don't we? Okay? We do. So there are people who've done a lot of work. And the statistics vary, but the general notion is this, that people come to faith and understanding at various times. However, the reality is, and this is the very statistics, and this is kind of what most of them say, by the time someone reaches 19, a late teenager, it is a very rare thing that if anyone would come to faith after that. By the time you're 18, 19 years old, normally that's locked in. And they would say only 5% of all the believers in the world who have come to faith in Christ come to faith after they're 18 years old. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. 5% is a number, but that means that 95% don't. So these early year foundation things, these early year teaching, I'm not talking brainwashing, okay? Don't misunderstand me. Because I'm a big believer also in saying, well, here's why we believe this, okay? I'm not just saying pound stuff in her brain. At one point, she's going to be asking questions. Now, why is the sky blue, right? Where did Jesus, all these kind of things. Those are great questions. And sometimes the questions will be so much that, slow down, Aurora. But that's an awesome time, and a time of wondering, a time of thinking, a time of investigating. So today, what we are doing is incredibly important. We are dedicating Aurora to the Lord. What we are not doing is guaranteeing Aurora's entrance into heaven. Okay? Throughout church history, there's been various beliefs, and one particular group would believe that on a christening or a baptism or a dedication for a child, that the Holy Spirit would enter this child and they would be then guaranteed an entrance into heaven. But that is not true. Not true. So we need to understand that this is an incredibly important time. It is the responsibility of parents, the responsibility of godparents, the responsibility of the extended family. As a matter of fact, we're going to call this 3 layers. And the first layer would be the immediate family. The immediate family. That those who Aurora will see every day are going to be the most important people in her life. The most important. Because those are the ones that she will see every day. Okay? Morning, noon, and night. Sometimes too much at night, right? Been there, done that. Immediate family is important. Then there's extended family. Extended family. I don't have much in the way of extended family who are Christians. As a matter of fact, I did not become a Christian myself until I was 18 years old. So I was just on the edge. I had an uncle. And his family were believers, were Christians. And I remember my uncle who was talking about stuff, and it really made an impression on me as a young man. So extended family is important for you to understand. And you may be sitting there saying, Eric, well, I've never investigated this whole God thing in my life. And well, maybe you should consider it. Consider it. Because the reality is, if the function of a godparent is to be a godly example, we have no idea what a godly example is, then maybe you should check it out. Okay? Investigate it to find out what it is all about. But then, this is where sort of some of us come in who aren't sort of tied by blood or other connections. There's a church family. There's a responsibility there. There's an environment there that we want to provide Aurora. So as a church, are we going to be an example to Aurora? Are we going to love her? And are we going to be able to be accepting? Are we going to try and help parent? Are we going to help to be able to do all these things that need to happen? And so as we looked at Hannah, as we looked at how difficult it must have been for her to give over Samuel to the Lord, Adam and Jesse are doing this today, not in the extreme sense that Hannah is, okay? But that was a very unique circumstance. There was a unique situation there. So the question is, are we going to do that? Are we going to hold and have that kind of responsibility as